Hey everyone, welcome back. Got a bit of a longer video today for you. Let's walk through the timeline over the last couple days of Israel and what's happened in the Middle East. So this was shared yesterday at 17:38 Pacific Daylight Time is when I saw this. It says the Israeli War Cabinet has finished its meeting at Kiryat, coming to the decision to return residents to the north. In other words, a massive Israeli offensive against Hezbollah is now imminent, the Post reads. Okay, so I want to break this down into kind of a project management outline. The opportunity, if you will, is the path forward, I should say, is to return residents to the north. So if that's the opportunity, you then break that down into a list of tasks to achieve a successful return of residents to the north. I'm not saying I side with one side or the other. I'm just breaking it down from a project management perspective. Okay, so now you break that down into tasks. And while doing that, you have to break it down into categories such as risks to success, your strengths as an entity, as an individual, and as your individuals, and your weaknesses. And by filtering things through those lenses, you then arrive at specific tasks to do. You need to mitigate risks, enable your strengths, and address your weaknesses, or avoid situations that expose you to your weaknesses. And then you'll have a successful project. Okay, so if we look at this through that lens, let's move forward. It says additional tasks and armored vehicles of the IDF are arriving at the northern border with Lebanon. So you see military equipment moving into position in conjunction with that statement. This post says, in some of these networks, I'm not, by capturing this information and reading it, I'm not saying I support it. I'm saying it's a data point that's out there. You're going to see ideologies built into these posts. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with any of it. There's data in the post. So keep that in mind. This says, due to a shortage of IOF soldiers, the Israeli army has taken steps to begin integrating a new battalion comprised of soldiers from the Israeli Navy for the first time. And I'm switching out these words just so you understand the context of what this person's talking about. Yes, that's what they believe in, and that's what many of the Israelis believe in, but you might not know that. So I'm tying the word Israeli Navy and Israeli Army in there. Additionally, the IOF is recruiting African asylum seekers to participate in the Gaza G-word, offering them permanent legal status in the Israeli entity in exchange for serving in the IOF, according to Israeli reports. Many of the 30,000 African asylum seekers in the Israeli entity currently have temporary status. So we see this same theme across a lot of countries right now. Russia is allowing this. People that want to come and fight, I think it's for 2 years in the war with Ukraine, can receive citizenship. Likewise, we see the U.S. has been doing that for decades now. I served with many people who were serving to get their green card. And they were great people. It's a reality of the situation. All right, let's continue reading. Israeli Defense Minister tells U.S. military action against Hezbollah is needed. So, again, one more time. Israeli Defense Minister tells the U.S. military action against Hezbollah is needed. This is before the events that we're all hearing about today with the communications devices exploding. And we'll get into those details here in a minute. Israeli Defense Minister told a senior advisor to President Biden on Monday that military action was the only way to end months of cross-border violence between Israel and Hezbollah, the powerful Lebanese militia. The Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, met with the advisor, Amos Hochstein, who came to Israel in an attempt to prevent Israel's long-simmering conflict with the Iranian-backed militia. And I wouldn't say long simmering, because if you think about boiling water, You get it to a boiling point, then you turn it back to a simmering. I see this thing has been continuing to boil and that the heat has been getting turned up more and more. So that's not a correct, I think, adverb to describe the situation there. Or adverb conjunction. In a statement after Monday's meeting, Mr. Gallant said he had told Mr. Hochstein that the window for reaching a diplomatic solution to the conflict was drawing to a close because Hezbollah has decided to tie itself to Hamas. The only way left to return the residents to the north and their homes is via military action, Mr. Gallant said. Earlier on Monday, Mr. Gallant said he had delivered the same message to the American Defense Secretary, Lloyd J. Austin III, in an overnight phone call. The visit by Mr. Hochstein is part of efforts by the Biden administration to prevent an escalation and a widening of the conflict, says John Kirby, a White House spokesman. Netanyahu rival goes to Washington. Yair Lapid, the leader of Israel's paramilitary opposition, was in Washington on Monday. His office said he had met with Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor, and was also scheduled to meet with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Lapid's office said he had told Mr. Sullivan that Israel faced the danger of a severe war, and that anyone who is able to prevent it must invest every effort in doing so. In a post on social media, Mr. Lapid said he had also told Mr. Sullivan that time was running out for the hostages being held in Gaza and that a deal for their asylum was urgently needed. So we see these, I guess you could call them significant persons between the U.S. and Israel meeting and discussing that a war must be had against Hezbollah and that it is imminent. Netanyahu prepares to dismiss Gallant for refusing to declare war on Lebanon. So what do we just see up here? Mr. Gallant said he had told Mr. Hochstein that the window for reaching a diplomatic solution to the conflict was drawing to a close because Hezbollah itself has decided to tie itself to Hamas. So a number of statements in here lead me to believe that Gallant is not necessarily opposed against declaring a war, but that he is trying to take a level-headed approach and saying, let's try to work out the possibilities to have a diplomatic solution before declaring war. Right after this, literally the same day, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is allegedly considering the dismissal of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant due to his opposition to a large-scale attack on Lebanon. That's not what I'm reading here in these statements. I don't read that Gallant is against it, that he's opposing military action or a large-scale attack on Lebanon. What I'm reading is that he's attempting to resolve it diplomatically before, a large-scale attack that's going to hurt not only Hezbollah and maybe Hamas, who's very far away, but a lot of civilians in the process. There is a cost for war beyond just the direct military entities. There is always collateral damage. Always. Unnamed political sources claim that Netanyahu's office has circulated messages suggesting that Gallant's resistance to a military operation in Lebanon, regardless of whether the attack occurs, the groundwork is reportedly being laid for Gallant's removal. So it sounds like character assassination is happening here, where you have an idea that this person's a resistance to what you want to do, and you start assassinating his character, circulating messages suggesting Gallant's resistance to a military operation. Okay, let's keep reading. Hundreds of Hezbollah members wounded in Lebanon when pagers explode. This is an evolving event. We're still seeing the casualty numbers increase live right now. Hundreds of members of the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, including fighters and medics, were seriously wounded on Tuesday when pagers they used to communicate exploded, a security source told Reuters. A Hezbollah official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said the detonation of the pagers was the biggest security breach through Rapad. So we're gonna dive into some details on this event. So there's several videos circulating showing the pagers exploding, and I'm not going to show those on here because it will get the channel in trouble. But if you want to, well, there's a place, disclose.tv, where you can go find those. This says update 1,200 plus wounded so far following pager explosions, and that number has now tripled from that in a matter of an hour or so. The IDF Home Front Command has informed local Israeli authorities of a possible imminent escalation with Lebanon 4 minutes afterwards. Obviously, there's going to be an escalation with this happening. We're going to look at some context from different entities with this event happening, what it could mean for you, what it means for the West, what it means for the war in Russia and Ukraine, what it means for the kinetic activities in the Middle East, what it means for a potential future war in the Indo-Pacific region. There's a lot of implications of what this event is that goes far beyond the first order magnitude, the direct effect of this event. There's now second and third and fourth and so on magnitudes of order that just happened from this event transpiring. Lebanese and Syrian opposition pages claim that Hezbollah fighters in Syria were also hit by the IDF cyber attack, jamming attack that targeted new pagers models. At least 7 injured in southern Zainab district in Damascus. Per the reports, several members were admitted to the Sanamarian military hospital in SAA-controlled northern Dara. So we see Lebanon and Syria both being targeted by this, not just Lebanon. Local Lebanese netizens report failures and disruptions of mobile and GPS networks following the pager explosions. Islamic Republic of Iran's Mayor news agency claims Iranian ambassador to Lebanon, Mojtaba Amani, was injured by a pager explosion. And also, maybe this is related, maybe it's not. But we have to look at it because of proximity and the specific platform here itself. This post reads, just yesterday, a rare U.S. Air Force EC-130H compass call electronic warfare active in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The EC-130, so like a C-130 but electronic warfare variant, has disrupted enemy command and control communications, or can disrupt enemy command and control communications to perform offensive counter-information operations and carry out other kinds of electronic warfare attacks. The EC-130H carries hardware and software that give the ability to hack into wireless devices and more. I think there's another technology here being used that most people aren't aware of. And I'll give you the name up front. It's called scalar wave technology. And I had planned to show a video on here, but it's too long. It's about an hour and a half video by, I think it's Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, who studied what Tesla had been studying many decades ago, a century ago, about scalar wave technology, in which the Russians, since the 1950s and 60s, have largely perfected, but it has a kryptonite. It can't be used anywhere within close proximity to nuclear sources, because that's how we got Chernobyl. They tested this weapon not knowing that it would have an effect on nuclear material and cause Chernobyl to explode when the Russians were testing it. The real reason the reactors went into meltdown sequence. So again, more videos of what happened there in Lebanon this morning. Or I should say, it'll be, I guess, late afternoon their time. And that's an important context, too, of when this event happened. It didn't happen at night when people weren't around a bunch of civilians. If this was really targeting Hezbollah soldiers, it's interesting that they chose the most busy part of the day when people would have been interacting in public around citizens to do this. That actually increases the likelihood of collateral damage against non-fighter persons. And we see here an update on the count of casualties. This says 8 people dead, including a child, and about 2,800 wounded so far. This is a picture of the alleged pager in question. It's a very low-tech device. That's key, because we're going to look at second, third, and fourth order and so on magnitudes of impact of what this does psychologically to the world. The devices are most likely pagers. A pager is a small portable electronic device. Usually you know what a pager is if you're over the age of about 30, 35. If you're not, go look it up. It says the model of the pagers that exploded in Lebanon are Gold Apollo AR-924. Apollo Electronic Paging Company is a company based in Taiwan. And it looks like, let's see. There was a couple admins on this page that said they most likely hacked or frequency jammed. Frequency jammed, but with scalar wave technology, and that's an important piece to this. We've never seen this before in history, anything like this, and now we're seeing this. It's a display of a new technology that I would say probably 99.999 continuous % of the population of the Earth has no idea exists, but nonetheless it does. The number of injured has now surpassed 3,000, and that was as of about 35 minutes ago, and increasing rapidly. So let's talk about first order magnitude. That's obvious. We have pagers exploding in the world and people being injured. Okay, now we talk about second order effects. What's going to be the effect from this cause? Do you think this is going to make things de-escalate in the Middle East or escalate in the Middle East? Do you think this is going to make countries and entities who have talked about an attack on Israel, do you think this is going to make them de-escalate their efforts or escalate their efforts? One of the interesting things about Afghanistan and Iraq was, let's say a drone would launch a strike on a village and hit several Taliban fighters in Afghanistan. The follow-on effect of that is somebody's brother, cousin, father, friend was now either dead or a casualty from the U.S. And so you might have taken out 5, 6, 7, 8 Taliban, but you just created 20 or 30 more who may have been on the fence about supporting the Taliban and maybe wanted things to de-escalate. But now, because you have personally touched their family and friend group in a very tight community as far as family and friend networks, you have now created people, fighters, who otherwise would not have been fighters. Second order effect, right? Let's talk about third order effects of someone who's not involved in either the first order, these devices exploding, pardon me, I'm a bit stuffed up today, these devices exploding, or the second order, the likely escalation that's going to come from this. Let's talk about third order. So basically third person, you and I viewing this stuff. Now, when reports initially came out, people were saying communication devices and alluding to it being cell phones. If you first heard about this without the context of a pager, I pose this question. Did you first hear this information and hear communication devices and people saying cell phones and think they could do this to my cell phone at any time if I'm on some sort of list out there because I share things and talk about things that are unpopular? And we're going to look at that and what Hillary Clinton said recently as well in the context of this event. So again, this is a massive event that's not being built out in scope as far as multiple layers of magnitude and effects. Let's talk about another third order effect. What is, or maybe a fourth order effect, is a future potential use of this technology. What does this communicate to both parties in the war in Russia. When I say both parties, I mean the West versus the East, because we have NATO-backed forces, or NATO forces backing Ukraine, and we have Russia and its partnerships on the Eastern Front against Ukraine. Both sides have multiple alliances feeding into that war. Okay, so this technology was just displayed. What does this potentially generate in both of those militaries and those entities thinking about this example of electronic warfare in combat? And beyond just pagers, because scalar wave technology is not just specific to pagers. This could have been that they noticed a trend of people in Hezbollah that were using these pagers. Maybe they tracked their bank records. Maybe they had close human intelligence that was close and seeing that they were all using the same pagers, whatever. And they specifically targeted this frequency with scalar wave technology. That's a real possibility. The scalar wave technology can target any specific frequency or a range of frequencies and create a kinetic attack by energizing the source to a point that it explodes. Or you can use scalar wave technology to generate explosions yourself at the points of origin of those frequencies. So the device itself may not have been energized to the point of exploding, but because you can zero point that and the emission of that frequency range to a specific location, you're not actually causing the device to explode. You're causing a micro explosion using scalar wave technology. You're creating localized energy via electronic warfare and exploding, causing a micro explosion at that location, but not literally causing the explosion of the battery itself. And that's key to understanding what this could mean in a broader context of warfare, meaning anything that has an electronic frequency emission, your laptop, your cell phone, your car, military communications, satellites, anything that emits an electronic frequency could be targeted with a micro explosion. Again, it's not the device itself necessarily exploding. It's causing an explosion at the location of the source of the transmitter and receiver. And if you want to go look it up, I'm telling you, go check out, it's on YouTube on a few channels. You can still find it for now. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, Scalar Wave Technology. And basically throughout the 80s and finally a breakthrough happened in the 90s where we were able to do what the Soviets have been doing for decades and what Tesla was trying to explain to the world back in the 1920s. There's a number of events you can tie to that technology that have happened, and some of those videos go over that. I created a montage, a bit of a montage of videos a couple years ago on a different channel, and I might re-upload that if I still have it and I can find it. So, pardon me. What does that mean to warfare now? So that's a third order. Fourth order is, okay, so these countries decide to start doing stuff, manufacturing, production, research, and development of this technology, which then changes the economies of these countries, which then changes it changes the culture there, because you're starting up research and development, production, and manufacturing of these electronic warfare capabilities. That's a fourth order effect. And the fifth order effect is you change the world profoundly when technologies like this are utilized. So there's several growing scopes of impact of these events transpiring. Most people only look at the first order effect, the event itself, and don't broaden it out. Okay. And so then you let's put in the context of all these 5G towers that have been built across the West over the past decade, and especially over the past 4 to 5 years. You can drive through the flyover states, as they're called in the US. You can drive through that area and you will see 5G towers all over the place. I've done it and found myself wondering, why out here in the middle of nowhere, where there's not even cows and farmland and nothing going on, why do they need 5G towers out here? You can go hiking up through the forest and all over the place, and you'll see 5G towers out there. And again, I find myself wondering, why do they need 5G towers out here? So I've, for a long time, hypothesized that part of these towers is a capability to move unmanned vehicles, aerial and ground-based and whatever, drones, if you will, across large landscapes and maintain a very high frequency connection with them that might be needed to respond and act accordingly. That's just a theory I've had. But now I look at this and I say, okay, if you can target with a transmitter a receiver source and its signature with scalar wave technology, which is very simple. It's not complex. Tesla was using this back in the 1920s and 30s, I believe was the time frame. Maybe a little earlier. The Soviets were using it in the 1950s and 60s, 70s, and have been using it since. The US has been using it since the late 80s, early 90s, and perfecting it ever since. This is not complex technology. There are citizens in the world who have built similar devices. There are cultish groups in the world who built similar devices. And it has the ability to cause earthquakes. It has the ability to project images across the world without having a localized image production piece of equipment. So like holographic images. So you could cause a major UFO sighting to occur, but they're just holograms being projected by bouncing signals off the ionosphere, which I've talked about in other videos about the ionosphere and electron cascading. So this technology is extremely powerful. It doesn't just have the ability to cause micro explosions at localized transmitter receiver sources. It has the ability for a lot of stuff. It has the ability to turn the world's oceans into completely visible images to where you can see exactly where enemy submarines are. You can see exactly where various wreckage is at. You can see all the seafloor with this stuff. You can see where oil deposits are with this technology. So it goes far beyond this that has been exposed to the world now, if that is the technology being used. And if that is the technology being displayed here without being exactly identified as the source technology, major implications, because that means things have just heated up substantially in the world. So let's put that in the context of something Hillary Clinton just said recently. I believe I forwarded it to my collection point. Let's see if I can find it. Might have to do a search. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Hillary Clinton says Americans engaged in propaganda should be put in prison. Notice propaganda here is in quotes. Let's go ahead and watch this.
And boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence because than boosting Trump back in 20.
All right. So if you speak out against the official narrative, that would be propaganda. If you don't align with the things that many people are questioning these days, that is propaganda. Do they have the ability to track and trace all of your communications? Well, we see they have the ability to identify the transmitter and receiver source of pagers. Interesting. This event proposes so many different questions about what's now possible. that's about all I have for this episode. I don't think there's anything else I can add here right now. Just a reminder, go look up that video, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, Bearden, I believe. Scalar wave, scalar, SCALER, wave technology. And look at what this is capable of. I believe there's a channel called Dutch Sense that once posted the video and a couple of videos. And at one point, I believe he claimed that after Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden's death, his group of publicists sent him independently VHS tapes of interviews from him back in the 90s, perhaps late 80s, I can't remember, of this technology that is broadly suppressed. Why doesn't the whole world know this technology exists? Well, it's because they don't want people to know it exists. But it is out there if you want to find it. Until next time, stay exponentially aware.